Chapter 19 of The Professor. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. The Professor by Charlotte Bronte. Chapter 19, Part 1. Novelists should never allow themselves to weary of the study of real life. If they observed this duty conscientiously, they would give us fewer pictures checkered with vivid contrasts of light and shade. They would seldom elevate their heroes and heroines to the heights of rapture, still seldomer sink them to the depths of despair. For if we rarely taste the fullness of joy in this life, we yet more rarely savour the acrid bitterness of hopeless anguish; unless, indeed, we have plunged like beasts into sensual indulgence, abused, strained, stimulated, again overstrained, and at last destroyed our faculties for enjoyment. Then, truly, we may find ourselves without support, robbed of hope. Our agony is great, and how can it end? We have broken the spring of our powers. Life must be all suffering, too feeble to conceive faith. Death must be darkness. God, spirits, religion can have no place in our collapsed minds, where linger only hideous and polluting recollections of vice. And time brings us on to the brink of the grave, and dissolution flings us in, a rag eaten through and through with disease, wrung together with pain, stamped into the churchyard sod by the inexorable heel of despair. But the man of regular life and rational mind never despairs. He loses his property, it is a blow. He staggers a moment. Then his energies, roused by the smart, are at work to seek a remedy. Activity soon mitigates regret. Sickness affects him, he takes patience, endures what he cannot cure. Acute pain racks him, his writhing limbs know not where to find rest. He leans on hope's anchors. Death takes from him what he loves, roots up and tears violently away the stem round which his affections were twined. A dark, dismal time, a frightful wrench. But some morning religion looks into his desolate house with sunrise, and says that in another world, another life, he shall meet his kindred again. She speaks of that world as a place unsullied by sin, of that life as an era unembittered by suffering. She mightily strengthens her consolation by connecting it with two ideas, which mortals cannot comprehend, but on which they love to repose: eternity, immortality. And the mind of the mourner, being filled with an image, faint yet glorious, of heavenly hills, all light and peace, of a spirit resting there in bliss, of a day when his spirit shall also alight there, free and disembodied, of a reunion perfected by love, purified from fear, he takes courage, goes out to encounter the necessities and discharge the duties of life. And though sadness may never lift her burden from his mind, hope will enable him to support it. Well, and what suggested all this? And what is the inference to be drawn therefrom? What suggested it is the circumstance of my best pupil, my treasure, being snatched from my hands and put away out of my reach. The inference to be drawn from it is, that, being a steady, reasonable man, I did not allow the resentment, disappointment, and grief engendered in my mind by this evil chance to grow there to any monstrous size, nor did I allow them to monopolize the whole space of my heart. I pent them, on the contrary, in one straight and secret nook. In the daytime, too, when I was about my duties, I put them on the silent system, and it was only after I had closed the door of my chamber at night that I somewhat relaxed my severity towards these morose nurslings, and allowed vent to their language of murmurs. Then, in revenge, they sat on my pillow, haunted my bed, and kept me awake with their long midnight cry. A week passed. I had said nothing more to Mademoiselle Reuter. I had been calm in my demeanour to her, though stony cold and hard. When I looked at her, it was with the glance fitting to be bestowed on one who I knew had consulted jealousy as an adviser, and employed treachery as an instrument, the glance of quiet disdain and rooted distrust. On Saturday evening, ere I left the house, I stepped into the salle à manger, where she was sitting alone, and placing myself before her, I asked with the same tranquil tone and manner that I should have used had I put the question for the first time, "Mademoiselle, will you have the goodness to give me the address of Francis Evans Henri?" A little surprised, but not disconcerted, she smilingly disclaimed any knowledge of that address, adding, "Monsieur has perhaps forgotten that I explained all about that circumstance before, a week ago." "Mademoiselle," I continued, "you would greatly oblige me by directing me to that young person's abode." She seemed somewhat puzzled, and at last, looking up with an admirably counterfeited air of naivete, she demanded, "Does monsieur think I am telling an untruth?" Still avoiding to give her a direct answer, I said, "It is not your intention then, mademoiselle, to oblige me in this particular?" "But, monsieur, how can I tell you what I do not know?" "Very well, I understand you perfectly, mademoiselle, and now I have only 2 or 3 words to say. This is the last week in July; in another month the vacation will commence. Have the goodness to avail yourself of the leisure it will afford you to look out for another English master. At the close of August I shall be under the necessity of resigning my post in your establishment." I did not wait for her comments on this announcement, but bowed and immediately withdrew. That same evening, soon after dinner, a servant brought me a small packet. It was directed in a hand I knew, but had not hoped so soon to see again. Being in my own apartment, and alone, there was nothing to prevent my immediately opening it. It contained 4 5-franc pieces, and a note in English. "Monsieur, I came to Mademoiselle Reuter's house yesterday, at the time when I knew you would be just about finishing your lesson, and I asked if I might go into the schoolroom and speak to you. Mademoiselle Reuter came out and said you were already gone. It had not yet struck 4, so I thought she must be mistaken, but concluded it would be vain to call another day on the same errand. In one sense the note will do as well; it will wrap up the 20 francs, the price of the lessons I have received from you, and if it will not fully express the thanks I owe you in addition, if it will not bid you good-bye, as I could wish to have done, if it will not tell you, as I long to do, how sorry I am that I shall probably never see you more, why, spoken words would hardly be more adequate to the task. Had I seen you, I should probably have stammered out something feeble and unsatisfactory, something belying my feelings rather than explaining them. So it is perhaps as well that I was denied admission to your presence. You often remarked, monsieur, that my devoirs dwelt a great deal on fortitude in bearing grief. You said I introduced that theme too often. I find indeed that it is much easier to write about a severe duty than to perform it, for I am oppressed when I see and feel to what a reverse fate has condemned me. You were kind to me, monsieur, very kind. I am afflicted, I am heartbroken to be quite separated from you. Soon I shall have no friend on earth. But it is useless troubling you with my distresses. What claim have I on your sympathy? None. I will then say no more. Farewell, monsieur. F.E. Henri. I put up the note in my pocket book. I slipped the 5-franc pieces into my purse, then I took a turn through my narrow chamber. Mademoiselle Reuter talked about her poverty, said I, and she is poor, yet she pays her debts and more. I have not yet given her a quarter's lessons, and she has sent me a quarter's due. I wonder of what she deprived herself to scrape together the 20 francs. I wonder what sort of a place she has to live in, and what sort of a woman her aunt is, and whether she is likely to get employment to supply the place she has lost.